Today we are going to test out the Mungyo Gallery watercolor paints. These are a professional grade and we're going to see how well they work. So the first thing I'm going to say is I'm not really thrilled with the color palette because they give you a white and a black, which I would rather have burnt sienna and a burnt umber to replace those. And they give me two greens, and neither of them is a really natural green. That I would rather have another yellow and another blue so I can mix a variety of greens. And I also get an orange, which I don't need because I can use the red and the yellow to mix for that. So I would prefer putting a Payne's Gray in there. So really, out of the colors I do have, well, I will tell you all the colors and then tell you the ones that I would, normally put in my palette. And this is just a personal choice. It's different for everyone. But I find if you have more primary colors than secondaries, you can mix a huge variety of secondaries and get a much better palette. So they include white, yellow ochre, yellow, orange, permanent red, yellow green, viridian, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, permanent violet, light red, and black. Now, typically I do like to have a yellow ochre, so let's see how that goes. So I have very little water on here. I didn't get as much pigment as I would like when I first do it, but I'm going to do them all the same. So I'm taking my brush and I'm just wiping off the excess water, going in, grabbing, and checking. So the yellow picks up a lot more and it fades out nicely. Clean that one up a bit. So the colors are very bright when wet. Okay, so now I'm looking at these. They're almost all dry, just waiting on the black. I find the colors are very flat. You get a good pigment at the start. They do fade out very quickly. And I just find that they're not as vibrant a color as I'd like for the amount of pigment that's in there. It's very muted, very flat. And that I expect of the black. I mean, I typically don't use black and white in my watercolor. If I want white, I either use the color of my paper, or I am using a white gouache to mix up a pastel color if I want to hide something, or I will use a white gouache or Doc Martens pH bleed proof white if I want to add a little bit of white at the end for something I didn't put in earlier. I don't use black, and this is why. See how flat that is? Normally the rest of my colors aren't as flat, but the black is flat, and I always find black is a flat looking color that if I want to have like a nice shadow, a crisp shadow, I will either go with a Payne's gray, or I will mix an ultramarine blue with like an ultramarine blue with a burnt sienna. But I don't have either of those in this palette, and I don't have the Payne's gray. Of this palette, the ones that I would normally keep would be the yellow, the permanent red, instead of cerulean blue and cobalt, which I like both of them, but I would usually, if this is limited to only the 12, I would go with an ultramarine blue and a Prussian blue. And then I like this light red, but it's more like a terracotta red. So it's the closest to my browns that I have in here. And the reason I like to have a couple of browns in here, which are usually burnt sienna and burnt umber, are because it's much easier to use those than to try and consistently mix up a brown, because the brown will take all three primaries and you have to be really good at mixing to get those colors. To get them every time the same color is what I mean. The other thing is the greens don't work for me. I mean, if I had an extra big palette, I would use this yellow green, but the Viridian isn't something I would see in nature. Now, I may use it for something else, but I would much prefer mixing my yellow or my yellow ochre with the blues, and that would give me better greens to go with. Same thing with the orange. I could just use the yellow and the permanent red to get that. So I don't need them in my palette. I would much rather have another yellow or another red, because the more primary colors I have, the more secondary colors I can mix up. The purple, the permanent violet, it's very nice color, but as I say, I could mix it up with my primaries, my blue and my reds, and get one. Now, if you find a color that you really, really like, put it in your palette. You know, if you don't have to mix it, that makes life a little easier at times. But I actually really enjoy mixing my colors. This palette doesn't look to me to be a good one for all round. This is something I would think more to give to children to play with, because it's got really bright colors. They're not going to mind that it's not as vibrant. As I say, you got some bright colors there, but they're flat looking, and it'll be harder for me to get the depth I want if everything's looking so flat. I like to have a little bit more of a creamy texture to my paints, and I like them to be a bit vibrant, more vibrant, and a little bit bolder. That said, I'm going to try mixing a couple and see how they work. So I'm going to start first mixing wet on wet. So I'm just going to do a little circle here. Going to grab a little bit of yellow, pop some in there. Going to grab a bit of red, Pop it in there. The red seems to want to move more. Let's see how the blue does. I will go with the cerulean and pop that in there. Oh, might need a bit more water there. I'll put a bit more water, see if that helps. Even putting more water, it's not moving all that much. You can see how the red really took over. The yellow didn't. It stays more concentrated. Same with the blue. I mean, I'm getting a little bit of bleed here, but that's where I've really soaked it. But there's a lot of water in that, see, right in that center section? And it's just sitting there. It's not moving. Like this, the water is going all, it's wet all the way, you can see. I'm moving it with my brush, but it's not really blending. It is starting to go into here, but that's because I'm pushing in the center, which means I can do that as well. But I don't think on its own it was moving that much. The red moves very nicely. I like that. But the other two aren't doing so as much. Going to see how they mix together. If I mix them in a palette, so I'll put some yellow. Get that fairly pigmented. We'll start with it very pigmented and see what we think. Then I'm going to go with some red. Okay, and I'm going to pull that into the yellow. I'm going to add some more yellow. But the thing I am noticing is, even though I started off fairly pigmented, like you can see I have very little water in there, but it's not flowing very well. Let's try that. So I do like this orange. Now let's just put a little bit of water in there and see how well it blends. Okay, so that's not bad. So they move nicely. I find the reds, when they dry, they get very pale and flatter. Overall, I think the colors are bright and fun. It's not a palette I would choose, especially as a beginner watercolor artist. You would want to have something more where you can mix the colors you need, or have more colors that would be easier to use for you to start. Like not having any real browns. I mean, this light red, it's looking brown in this video, but it's actually more of a terracotta color. That's just, I guess, the lighting on how the lighting's hitting it. But it's a bit, the other colors are looking pretty true. That's the closest to my brown though. And I mean, if I'm seeing what's on screen, I'd say, yeah, use it as brown. But as I say, it's more of a terracotta. Maybe if I angle that, you can see it, or bring it up. No, it's still looking a bit more brown, but it is a terracotta color. I could still use it in some browns, but it's not enough. And I'm not going to add black to anything to mix it. So I would be adding other colors to mix it. So why not have me mix, or have me have a color I can actually use up front. And then if I want to adjust it, then I can mix it a little bit. This one's not truly a brown, so I'd have to mix stuff to make it a brown, or mix up a brown. So that's one of my big things. My biggest thing with this is the choice of colors, and that the colors are bright but flat looking. That blue, after I pushed it a lot, seemed to blend nicely, but you'll see the yellow didn't even move, even though the red was bleeding, and fading out. That yellow was just stopping it. It was really not blending really well. So that means that it will be harder for me to do mixes wet on wet. I can mix the colors ahead of time and use them, as you see, because this is actually quite nice. And I like those colors, and I like the colors that mixed. I find the color is a little bit more vibrant than, so I'll show you. So this orange I find is a little bit more vibrant than this orange. This is a brighter orange. It's just because they are different tones, but I find the mixing actually helped it a bit. But I still find all the colors to be very flat and lackluster. So would I buy these as a beginner watercolor artist? Probably not, as there are so many other choices out there. And I certainly don't find this on par with any of my other professional quality paints. It's a nice little starter pack, as I say, for children. They can have fun playing with it. But if you want, I mean, I did a video recently where I compared Winsor Newton Cotman paints, Rosa, they're professionals, and Koi watercolors. And all of them are much, much better choice than this one. And one of the reasons I point that out is that if you're starting and you really want to find out if you like something, you want to start with something that will make it easier for you to achieve your goals than to just go ahead and frustrate yourself trying to mix the colors you need and then not getting the depth to your paintings that you would like. So I hope you found this helpful. That is my review on the Mungyo Gallery Professional Paint Box of 12. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button if you would like to see more of my videos. Be sure to ring the bell if you'd like to get notifications when I post new videos. Thank you for watching.